From South Carolina Public Radio, this is the South Carolina Lede. I'm your host, Gavin Jackson, and this episode was recorded on June 28th, 2024, from South Carolina Public Radio Studios here in Columbia. We are in our lead summer season, a season of leads, some would say. And with that, we like to bring you in-depth conversations with the people at the center of major issues, as well as insightful folks who are doing interesting things in our state. We want you to know about that. Now, today is my interview with the new South Carolina Department of Transportation Secretary Justin Powell. He replaced agency veteran Secretary Christy Hall earlier this year, and he's continuing to steer the ship toward the horizon. The ship that Hall completely righted during her tenure. Now, if you don't know much about things when it comes to infrastructure or how things got to where we are right now, if you're new to the state, this will be very informative to you. But just a little bit of context here. The state legislature increased the gas tax by 12 cents under the 2017 roads bill and also sent more revenue streams to the underfunded SCDOT. The gas tax was fully funded in 2022, and it's still lower than North Carolina and Georgia. It's about 28.7 cents. And that has helped the agency put more than $6 billion worth of work under contract across all corners of the state. The General Assembly also approved $200 million for bridge repairs and an additional $200 million for county transportation committees, which again, if you need your street paved, if it's in horrible condition, if you have a pothole, reach out to your local county transportation committee. And of course, also in the budget this year, there's $117 million for rural road safety because we have some of the most deadly rural roads in the country. Of course, all that, and I'm talking about that new funding that happened after my interview with Secretary Powell, but you'll hear me talk about that situation our bridges are in and one that caused major disruptions last December. But that's not all you're going to hear in this interview. In fact, I was over in Malfunction Junction talking with Justin Powell about everything going on in the state, including that $2 billion project right here, the crossroads of South Carolina of I-26 and I-20. If you haven't driven through Malfunction Junction, I wouldn't if I didn't have to. But if you want to, come see the insanity, because it's about to be fixed in a couple of years. But I kicked off our interview by asking him just how pivotal this moment is for our state.
I think where we're headed as a state right now is, you got to think about where we were 10 years ago. So about 10 years ago, we had about $1 billion worth of construction contracts happening at the state at any one point in time. Thanks to the investments from the General Assembly back in 2016, 2017, particularly 2017 roads bill, we've seen just a dramatic increase in the amount of work we're able to do across South Carolina. So right now, we just crossed the line that we have over $6 billion in construction going on across South Carolina, just on projects like the one you see behind us.
So when we talk about $6 billion worth of construction, that's huge, obviously. We're talking about Malfunction Junction right here. We'll talk about interstates and big projects in a second, but this project itself is $1.7 billion, right?
Yeah, it's just under $2 billion. The phase you're looking at here is about $200 million just on the contract for this one, which is to rebuild it. But we've got interstate projects going in every corner of South Carolina right now, but we've got bridge projects, paving projects, just a tremendous amount of road work in all 46 counties.
So we talk about that $6 billion under contract right now. We talk about getting the gas tax to where it is right now, around 28.75
cents, yeah.
So at that level, still that was a big stretch just to get that extra 12 cents. How much more money does the agency need to really keep up with what is going on with growth in the state?
Sure. So I think one of the challenges we're confronting as a state, that gas tax increase, and that let us implement our 10-year plan, which really focused on 4 key areas: interstates, pavements, bridges, and on safety. That was really a system recovery plan. So it was because we had 30 years without any real funding coming into the agency. We're really just in that recovery stage where we were to get the system in better shape. You know, South Carolina now is the fastest growing state in the country. Just a tremendous amount of growth, a lot of it attributable to the investments we've been making in infrastructure, not just on roads, but in the port, water, sewer, broadband, all across South Carolina. So if we're going to keep up with the momentum we've seen in South Carolina, we really do need to start planning ahead for how we deal with congestion, how we deal with growth, particularly in both sides of urban South Carolina as well as rural South Carolina.
At this point, enough money to keep up. At this point, do you have enough to keep up?
So I think, where we are right now is I think we're well positioned on our pavement program. I think we're making some real strides on safety. An area that is going to be an emphasis for me in my tenure and will continue to be a discussion with the General Assembly, is funding for bridges. So we've got 8,400 bridges across South Carolina. About 2,400 of them are 60 years or older, and we designed most of our bridges to last at least 60, but usually 75 years on that. So we've just got a huge inventory of aging bridges that we've got to tackle. And so we've made an ask to the General Assembly for additional bridge funding over the next several years so that we can start chipping at that backlog and making a real meaningful impact on our bridges.
So Justin, when we talk about interstates and bridges and safety and all those different investments that are underway in the state right now, are these projects on time? Are they in line with the 10-year plan? Are we ahead of the 10-year plan at this point? Obviously, year 7.
Sure. So, the 10-year plan came out of the 2017 roads bill, which was an increase in the gas tax, but it also added sales taxes into our revenues, other DMV fees into those, to what we're coming in as a department. But we took a chance to not just look at increasing our budget by 1 or 2%, but to really say, what are the outcomes we're going to get as a state? And so we basically set out 4 major key goals. One is on rural road safety. So we have the unfortunate distinction of having the nation's worst rural road fatality rate. We want to try to tackle that. We can't fix speeding, we can't fix drunk driving, but we can engineer solutions that can keep people in their lane, if they get out of their lane, correct without hitting an object. So we targeted 1,000 miles. We've already gotten 1,000 miles under contract on that. Bridges, we started off with a goal of 465 bridges. We've increased that goal to 500 bridges. We've got 7 years in, we've got 350 bridges under construction, so on track there. Pavements, we know we got a big backlog on that, but we have the 4th largest state highway system in the country, 41,000 miles long. We've gotten over 8,000 miles of pavement work started in the past 7 years to start recovering the system. And then on our interstates, we've actually grown that program because of investments we've gotten from the General Assembly, and they've gotten over 100 miles of interstate projects happening all across South Carolina.
So you're talking about 8,000 miles of pavement, 360 some bridges, 100 miles of interstate. When we talk about, you're also talking about rural roads and the safety out there. What about when it comes to the next 10 years? You're talking about year 7 of this first 10-year plan. How do you guys determine where to put money, where to invest, what to fix next?
So, that whole exercise that we did with the 10-year plan was really to focus on what kind of outcomes we get, what kind of returns we're going to do. One of the things we've started right now is we're starting the next 10-year plan. So as we're wrapping up the current 10-year plan, we're working now on what that plan is going to look like. We've actually started that process, and it's called the Momentum 2050 plan that we have going on right now. We've started this public survey. Encourage residents to participate in that survey. You can find it at moving.southcarolinaforward.com. But I think we're going to look at a lot of trends affecting South Carolina. The growth of the Port of Charleston is going to mean a lot of more containers, more freight coming through South Carolina. We've got to deal with continuing the recovery of our system. We've got to keep repaving roads. We've got to keep rehabilitating bridges, maintenance first priority. We've got to deal with growth. And that's not just dealing with Charleston and Myrtle Beach and Greenville and the exponential rates of growth they've been seeing, but we've also got to make sure we can connect rural South Carolina to the global economy. And then fourth, the world's changing. Technology is changing. We're seeing people adopt electric cars. And regardless of how you feel about electric cars, they're already changing our business. And so we've got to be able to, when you get paid through the gas tax, how do you continue to fund transportation, keep up the momentum we've had? But we also, electric cars are different than regular cars. They're heavier, they have a lower center of gravity, which means we got to rethink how we do maintenance and safety as well. So those are the big trends and challenges that we've got to look at that we're going to incorporate into that plan.
And when we talk about pavements, that's one of your biggest areas of investment. Is that because obviously that it's been neglected for so long, but also something that people really see every day, more or less? I mean, there's no part of the state that's not being repaved to some extent.
We put out just recently with our commission another 700 miles of paving projects across South Carolina. So they just approved that. When you talk about the sheer size of our system, 41,000 miles long, you've got to focus on just your core maintenance responsibilities going. So we have the 4th largest system in the country. Only Texas, North Carolina, and Virginia have. And those are all much bigger states than South Carolina. Little old South Carolina has got a huge system, so that maintenance is just something we've got to do, and that's really where we have focused almost all those dollars that we've gotten from the 2017 roads bill.
Let's talk about interstates. We're right here, I-26, I-20, big interchange malfunction junction, which you guys are renaming Carolina Crossroads, obviously because you are improving this, and you guys broke ground, I guess, 3 years ago on this, so it's fascinating to see how much has already been done. But we're talking about Interstate 26, which spans the entire state from the upstate down to the Midlands to the Low Country. But a lot of the work is happening here in the Midlands down to the Low Country when it comes to expansion of the interstate. Walk us through what's going on with the system right now, especially for folks maybe who are driving around this area. They know things have been 2 lanes for a while up here, but it's about to be, multiple lanes coming into Columbia. Then obviously going down to the Low Country will be 3 lanes both directions. What's the progress like on that, and how long is that going to take to be built out?
Sure. So I think, we've got, as I said, interstate projects happening in basically every corner of South Carolina right now. A big project going on in Cherokee and Spartanburg counties to widen I-85. So basically you can go from Anderson to the North Carolina line in 6 lanes. Hoping to wrap that up by the end of the year. We've got some major projects happening here in Columbia, widening of I-26 between Little Mountain and Irmo. And then, Malfunction Junction is a key project. So this is one of the 3 major kind of pinch points that we've defined in the state, 385, 85 in Greenville, which has been done for a few years. This interchange, and then 526 down in the Charleston area. But this is about a $2 billion project. We've broken up into several phases, so you'll see those phases right now. So we've gotten the first 2 under construction right now. This one is rebuilding the Colonial Life interchange, improving the access if you're coming from 26 westbound, want to head eastbound onto 126. We're also rebuilding the Broad River Road interchange over on kind of the eastern side of the interchange to improve not only that interchange, but the moving from I-20 west to go west on I-26. But kind of you'll see us continue to do a lot of work. We're going to be clearing the main interchange in the near future. We're going to start widening. We've started the procurement on widening I-20, basically coming from Lexington back towards the interchange. And we're just going to continue to work around each quadrant of the interchange and keep working on until we get to the middle of it, and then we'll work on the full interchange. So it's going to be a tremendous amount of work and activity. It's one of the most exciting projects we've got going on in the state and nationally, really. I think the other really exciting thing we've got is our rural interstate widening program. So I-26 breaks down between Columbia and Charleston with regularity. My parents live in the Charleston area, and it's always a challenge getting down to see them. The volume of freight we've seen coming out of the Port of Charleston. So we are working right now to widen that for 6 lanes between Columbia and Charleston. That'll help with hurricane evacuation. And we've gotten 3 projects already underway. So we've got widening coming out of Charleston from 187 to 194. We just went under contract here in Columbia, coming on the other end from 125 to 136. And then we're under contract to rebuild the I-26, I-95 interchange. And we'll just continue to work our way down from both ends until we meet up in Orangeburg County and complete the project.
Around 2030, right?
About 2030 is when we'll have it all underway.
And then Malfunction Junction, Carolina Crossroads will be complete around, is it on time? What are you shooting for when completion?
It'll be all done in the early 2030s.
Okay, so then at that point, we're going to be pretty much rocking and rolling in the state when it comes to just moving things faster and better.
And then we'll be moving on to the 526 project down in the Charleston area, which will be the largest and most expensive project we've ever tackled as a state.
And then you also have to look at 95 too, right? That's the next shoe to drop when everyone's talking about coming in from Georgia and how difficult it just goes from those 3 lanes to those 2 lanes, and then it slows everything down.
So at 95, thanks for reminding me about that.
There's so many, so it's easy
so
to
much
forget.
going on right now. So we're on track to let a contract to do the first 8 miles coming in from Georgia. That'll include rebuilding the bridge across the Savannah River from Georgia and going up all the way to Hardeeville. But our plans right now, we have in design basically the whole corridor from the Georgia border up to exit 33, which is Point South, where you head off to go to Charleston, make that a 6-lane facility as well. So just a tremendous amount of activity happening across South Carolina, and why we're becoming increasingly the attention of the country.
So just I know there's always a joke about adding one more lane will fix it, right? Even though we know that's not always the case. In many ways it's not. But at what point do we start seeing state, local, federal governments starting to throw more money into connectivity, rapid transit, mass transit? How do we get to that point? Because we're going to get to a point where we can't just build our way out of the situation.
No, I mean, there's a limit to where you do that. And I would say particularly in the Charleston area, there's going to be just not enough geography to just keep adding extra lanes on that. So that requires us thinking about other tools in the toolbox, and that can be how do we maximize the flow through of our existing corridors, so retiming signals, controlling access, improving turn lanes, all those things that we can just push as much traffic through. But one of the projects we are working on with folks down in Charleston is a bus rapid transit system that they're developing, and we've agreed as kind of the largest public works entity in the state of South Carolina to build it for them. So I mean, there's kind of an exciting opportunity coming from that one as well.
Let's talk about bridges. You were just mentioning 8,400 bridges are owned by SCDOT. A lot were built back in the 60s, and they're getting past their useful life at this point. How concerned are you and DOT at this point when it comes to reliability and what could happen to these bridges?
So let's talk about how we kind of inspect and review bridges. So we check every bridge by federal standard, federal requirement every 2 years. So there's a bridge inspection on every single bridge in the state. If there's a safety concern, we'll shut down the bridge. There's no questions asked about that. But right now, we've got about 60 to 70 bridges that are closed across South Carolina right now. We've got another 670 to 680 bridges at any one time that are load posted, that are usually not a passenger vehicle, but a truck, a fire truck, a school bus may not be able to pass over that. So that has real impacts to communities getting around. We just view that as the tip of the iceberg. When you talk about the age of our bridges, and you talked about, you've got a number of bridges that are 60 years or older, we've got 2,400 right now that are 60 years old. And if we keep up with our current level of investment as a state, we're going to be at 3,900 bridges that are 60 years or older in 10 years. So we've got to tackle this. I view this as probably the biggest issue confronting the department in the coming years, is that we've got to make sure that we ramp up our investment in bridges across South Carolina so that we can start tackling this issue, so we don't have closures, don't have postings that really negatively impact the movement of people and goods across the state.
And is that message getting through to the legislature? Obviously, we're taping this. The budget's not finalized yet. We have some idea that it could be some more money coming to the bridge program, but do they realize have you emphasized that to them, just how important these bridges are to the state? What could happen if one of them were to fail?
No, I think we saw it actually happen last December. We had a deck settle on I-20 that really required us to immediately close down that bridge, and we were able, through our contractors and our consultant partners, we were able to get it reopened in less than 2 days. But that challenge that we have, I think, is out there. And so I think they saw it firsthand from there. I think people understand that just infrastructure ages, infrastructure gets old over time, and no matter how well you maintain it, at eventually point you've got to go in and either do a major rehabilitation or replacement. So I think they understand the challenge that we have. Obviously, they've got to balance all the competing priorities that they got to deal with in the state budget as well.
And I guess that kind of goes back to the question we were talking about when it came to funding and the gas tax. Obviously, there's only so much money you can do coming in from that gas tax. So at this point, you have to supplement with a lot of one-time dollars. We're fortunate that we have a lot of extra money floating around the state too. So I'm guessing you, like we said, made that clear to them, especially when it comes to reliability. And when we see bridges collapsing in other parts of the country, that definitely probably, reinvigorates the argument too.
Yeah, no, I think it's just kind of like I feel like we've demonstrated a track record of, we say we go put out a project, that we'll deliver that project. And so certainly we're ready and stand ready and would have the plans and ready to execute if the General Assembly did provide those funds to us.
And just wrapping up with bridges, Justin, when it comes to how you guys decided on those first 365 or so bridges, were those the worst of the worst essentially? Are we working your way down? How do you prioritize these bridges?
So a lot of our prioritization process is based on those inspection reports that I talked about that we do every 2 years. So when we guide that, we focus our activities based on the traffic and the volume on it, but it's really based on the condition of the bridges. Is it posted? And if there's a major factory or major school route, is it the only way in and out of a place? Those are going to be where we prioritize through our process that we use to basically rank objectively where those projects need to be.
And now we can pivot to safety really quick and talk about our safety record. We're talking about really having deadly roads in South Carolina, which is an unfortunate claim to have, but that's because going back to road conditions, of course, but also contributing factors that we talked about. But in 2021, it looks like it was our worst year for traffic fatalities with about 1,200. And then last year that dropped to about 1,100. And so far this year, there have been about 301 deaths. What's driving these numbers? Is it roadway conditions? What else is at play here that you guys can maybe try and mitigate to make them safer?
Sure, you got to focus on, when you deal with safety, on traffic safety, it's kind of the 3 E's, education, enforcement, and engineering. And obviously, our partners at the Department of Motor Vehicles, Department departments of public safety, they really drive on the education and enforcement side of it. So I can't engineer out drunk driving. I can't engineer out speed if somebody's going 90 miles an hour on a 40 mile per hour road. Those type of things we've got to work on. But there are ways we can engineer it in, and we'll look at, basically assess. We'll take it based on the crash data that we have. We'll assess it. Mm-hmm. We'll look at it, and we'll come up with solutions on how we can reduce those crashes in those corridors. I'd say the spike we saw in 2021 was a nationwide spike. Mm-hmm. It was not just South Carolina that saw that increase, but I've been happy to see that in 2022 and 2023 we've seen those trends coming down. There's mm-hmm. still too many traffic deaths that we have, and we've been encouraged to see the rate that we've seen this year, and hope that trend will continue, that will continue to go down.
Yeah, 2021 coming back to life after COVID essentially, and then I guess a good thing in your favor when it comes to distracted driving, drunk driving, is that we just saw that law go into effect, cracking down on drunk driving even more so for folks, even first-time offenders having to get a breathalyzer in their car now, so that's going to probably help out, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, I think anything that we can do to reduce driving under the influence is a positive thing for South Carolina.
And as we wrap up, Justin, I want to ask you about electric vehicles. We talked about that a moment ago. Obviously, the gas tax is a huge driver of revenue for the agency. How do you foresee mitigating and offsetting that loss of revenue if we see a spike in people buying electric vehicles? Obviously, they are very popular, but it's still here and there when it comes to full rollout of EVs.
Yeah, certainly we haven't seen everybody's turned in their internal combustion vehicle and have bought an electric vehicle, but we've seen those registration numbers increase pretty significantly and really rapid rates of growth over the past few years. The gas tax is our number one source of state revenue. About $1 billion per year comes in from the gas tax. Obviously, when you power by electrons, you're not paying the gas tax in like everybody else is. So when you and I fill up right now, it costs us about $200 to $300 a year in gas taxes is what you're paying. Right now, we have a registration fee in South Carolina for electric vehicle users. It was actually one of the first in the country to be done, but it collects, you pay $120 every 2 years. So there is an issue about kind of equal contribution into the system, and so I think that's going to be a topic of discussion with the General Assembly in the coming years as we look at the increasing adoption of electric vehicles and how make sure that we can still sustainably fund our system going forward.
And a big issue with more people adapting electric vehicles too is just the lack of infrastructure to support them. When we talk about not only just charging stations, but rapid charging stations, how is DOT playing a part in maybe rolling those out, getting more of those out there? I mean, is that a DOT issue, or is that something that private companies should be taking up?
So ultimately, I personally view it as it's long-term, it's a private sector solution. When the department was founded in 1917, we weren't subsidizing the development of gas stations to pay the gas tax. But as part of the federal infrastructure bill that we've had, we do have about $70 million that's been given to DOT. We're doing a pretty aggressive called the National Electric Vehicle Initiative, NEVI. We have a planning process going on that we look for a public-private partnership to deploy those dollars to encourage the development of charging stations, particularly on the interstate, basically at a 50-mile increment. That process is active. Encourage folks to check out the website that we have on that as we're working through it. But at the end of the day, I view it as something that the private sector needs to step up and handle.
And just because it's in the news right now, we saw it's a big tragedy out of the Port of Baltimore earlier this year when it came to the Francis Scott Key Bridge being hit by out-of-control freighter that resulted in 6 deaths and that bridge being completely wiped out. That channel's up and running now too, but the bridge still needs to be rebuilt. We had a similar scary situation down the Low Country at the Arthur Ravenel Jr. Bridge that spans the Cooper River, where we also had a freighter that was somewhat out of control. Walk us through what happened there and the fears when it comes to those situations, and what we have in store or what's already on the books preparedness-wise when it comes to what could have happened and how we can mitigate those situations.
Well, I actually happened to be in the Charleston Traffic Management Center when that occurred. We were doing our annual drill to do hurricane lane reversals. One of the things that I saw happen was everybody did what they were supposed to do. The pilot showed his training, all the years of his experience of navigating ships through that channel. Really did a fantastic job of managing it through. The communication with the port, the Coast Guard to local law enforcement, we shut down the bridge, went from there. So what I would say is the plan went as it was supposed to. Unfortunately, the bridge, that ship passed under the bridge with no incident. I think what's important to note is the Ravenel Bridge was designed with modern container ships in mind. So underneath the piers of the bridge are basically 150 feet of a rock island, basically boulders the size of cars that are there with kind of ship protection to prevent something like that happened in Baltimore. So it is designed for kind of the modern shipping traffic that we see coming through the Port of Charleston. And so I would feel like we would be in a better situation. Obviously, you can't design and predict for every contingency, but that bridge was really designed to deal with those type of container ships going under it.
Gotcha. Yeah, and of course everything went to plan, like you said. So a real life drill, essentially.
Yeah.
So, and then just the last question, when it comes to people saying, when's my road going to get paved? When am I going to see improvements in my part of the state? What's your advice to folks as we're just year 7 of this 10-year plan now? What do you tell people when they want to know when things are going to happen in their neck of the woods?
Well, certainly, we encourage folks we have on our website a project viewer application. You can see all the projects that are going on in your area and plan. You got to recognize that there was a 30-year accumulation of deferred maintenance. So we've got a backlog we've got to work through. We've got tremendous growth happening at the state at the same time. We won't be able to solve it all in 10 years. We've made a significant dent in that backlog, and we're going to continue that investment level to start continuing to recover our system. And it's really because of the commitment from the General Assembly to make sure that we could have a modern system and modern funding behind it.
That was me with SCDOT Secretary Justin Powell, who is a listener.
Shout out.
And friend of the pod.
Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, you can watch that entire interview on youtube.com/South Carolina ETV. While you're there, hit that subscribe button and watch some other great content that we have. That's the show. No wind down here, folks, but you can always call 803-563-7169. Let us know about some of your favorite infrastructure in the state. Maybe you saw me on the side of the road. I was also under a bridge.
Wow.
They call me the lead troll.
No way.
But let us know what roads you love, what roads you hate in the state. Maybe you're confused about roundabouts. They're scary, but they're effective. 803-563-7169. Now, the South Carolina Lead is a production of South Carolina Public Radio. Our producer is A.T. Shire. Amy Crouch is our supervising producer. Sean Birch is our executive producer. This podcast is produced with support from PRX and is made possible in part by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, as well as listener contributions to the ETV Endowment of South Carolina. For the South Carolina Lead, I'm Gavin Jackson. Be well, South Carolina. Happy 4th of July.
You had it. You had it before. You just don't know. The tone's wrong now. You had it so
It's too
good.
much light.
No, it's the Celsius. It's the Celsius.
Too jacked up now.
Maybe if you had a Diet Coke also.
Yeah, just get rid of my teeth.